I think also recognising that the nature of work's changed. My understanding of the market, for example, is there's definitely been a lot more demand for high quality space, that people will need less of it perhaps, but they want it to be good quality. And so making sure that we're offering that is important too.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Black Hat Chat. My name is Andy Clow, Marketing Director here at Black Hat. Thank you for joining us today in some different surroundings to where we normally record. We're in a professional podcast studio. My first time having one of these mics in my face here. So excuse me if I bang it or anything like that accidentally. Today we're joined by a guest who's not part of the Black Cat family, but has got plenty to say, I'm sure, about the sector that we work in. Peter Taylor, elected Mayor of Watford Borough Council, or is it just Watford? Watford Borough Council, excellent. Watford's my hometown, and I'm proud / sad to say that I'm born and bred, and so I've got plenty of knowledge, I like to think, on the subject. And we're going to be talking about not just Watford itself, but how it and similar towns are thriving in, and hopefully thriving anyway, in current climate. So Peter, hello, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Excellent. I think the first question, as we kind of hinted at before this, is what is an elected mayor as opposed to a ceremonial who just wears all the bling and the funny hat?
Yeah, so sadly I have limited bling and no funny hat. So elected mayors are the leader of the council. So Watford had a referendum almost a quarter of a century ago, and 52% of the population voted for an elected mayor model. And my party
probably did. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, my party actually campaigned against it, and so it was a way of the entire town gets to vote for who is the leader of the council, and of course that gives you an extra bit of mandate to try and make changes. A lot of other places started to have them, so places like Torbay, Bristol, Liverpool. Some places no longer have elected mayors that chose to have one previously. And my role will probably be abolished in a couple of years' time when they reorganise councils in Hertfordshire.
I had read about that. So you quickly mentioned your party. Let's get that bit out there before we do the politics.
Yeah. So I'm a Liberal Democrat and first elected in 2018 to this role, and then re-elected in 22 and earlier this year.
Congratulations. And that's following on from your predecessor, who was also a Lib Dem. So we've been Lib Dem for how many years?
Yeah, a long time. So Dorothy Thornhill, who's now in the House of Lords and leads for the Lib Dems on housing and other issues, she was first elected in 2002. So she was for 16 years, 4 terms. So you're right, it's been quite a long period of Liberal Democrat mayors in Watford.
Most of my voting life anyway. So,
yes.
But we've not come in here because we want to specifically talk about politics. But obviously, there's lots going on in the British political climate at the moment. Absolutely. So I'm sure we will come to it. But ideally, I think what I'd really like to talk to you about is the success of a town like Watford, and it's one of those towns that there'll be many up and down the country. Parry, our producer, and I were talking earlier and talking about it as kind of like comparing a city and town in the sense of Premier League and Championship type thing. Occasionally, a town like Watford, like the football club, does go and do really well and gets up into the Premier League, but actually, the perception is more of a Championship. But how have you and the rest of the government and the investors and everything, how are we trying to become that Premier League town?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The first thing is just taking advantage of making the most of our advantages. So one of the big advantages Watford has is its location. Yeah. The fact that it's 15 minutes on the train to Euston, into central London. You've got 6 airports within an hour. I was told you've got half of the UK economy is within an hour's journey of Watford.
Currently.
That's true. Yeah. And so you've got great transport connections. Yeah. Obviously, you've got London on your doorstep, but also you're close to Oxford, Cambridgeshire, but also the fact that Hertfordshire itself is a big economy. So Hertfordshire's economy is worth £50 billion, which is the same as the entire economy of the whole of Cambridgeshire and Oxfordshire. So you often hear people talk about Cambridge-Oxford arc and all the rest of it and the growth potential there, but I think we forget that Hertfordshire's a very big economy. Obviously, it's got strengths in things like life sciences, creative industries, so loads and loads of strengths. And as we were saying before this, I think sometimes people don't appreciate the strength of Watford. And when you arrive here, you suddenly say, oh, it's better than I expected. There's lots of nice green space. There's a thriving town centre. There's a hustle and bustle, but also you've got the Chilterns on your doorstep. There's a good quality of life.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So in terms of population, to put it into scope so we can compare it with other towns, so my research, we're about 110,000
That's
people
right. Yeah.
in Watford. So, in terms of the investment that's coming in, we've got people here. It is commutable, like you
Yeah.
suggested. But I suppose if we look at some of the highlights of some of those big investors in employment and subsequently in property and everything that's more relevant to our sector, I've got a list, but maybe you could just kind of spiel off a few of the big swingers around here.
Yeah, we've got a lot of big swingers in Watford. I think many companies use it as their headquarters because of those.
Yeah.
So you've got people like TJX, you've got...
That's TK Maxx, right?
You've got Weatherspoons, you've got Hilton, you've got obviously Warner Brothers with the studios. 10% of it is in Watford Borough and 90% in our neighbouring authority.
Okay.
I mean, one of the interesting things about Watford, you're right, it's 110,000 people, but a lot of other places that are just on the cusp of Watford. If you ask people, where do you live?
Yeah.
They would say Watford. So there's a kind of a larger regional role of the town as well. But yeah, I'm trying to think of many more. You've got PwC, you've got an interest. If you go along Clarendon Road, a heck of a lot of big companies that have an interest.
KPMG are there, BP have had the history there.
That's right.
Still there, all those.
Yeah.
And suppose that's something very much to be proud of. And then even if you get away from those kind of recognised brands, spotted around, around the town, as you find with many others, there's lots of business parks.
Yeah, that's true.
And they seem to keep on growing.
That's true.
How does that affect you and the council? What effect are you having on
that? So you're right. I mean, I have lots of meetings with these with business leaders. So very close to here, for example, you've got Sigma, close to where we're sat now with all of the work in pharmaceuticals. And of course, as a district council, it's not like I can come along and, the last meeting I had was with a local business leader. Yeah. And one of the issues he raised was business rates are too high. Well, I probably agree with him, but there's nothing I can do about it. So I think lots of what I do is about creating opportunities for businesses to flourish, but also connecting businesses. Quite often when I meet businesses, they're not just interested in the bottom line. They're really interested in the community at large. Like, how can we support things? They might say to me, we really want to make sure that nobody's sleeping rough in Watford. Which charities could we partner with? Yeah. And also for their employees. I think their employees really care about the values and the ethos of the organisations that they're working for. And so having a conversation with me about, well, how can we be a good employer? We've got, for example, a Watford Business Pledge, which is all about supporting the environment, buying local, supporting local supply chains, all of that. And businesses are often really keen to talk to you about those issues.
Oh, that's brilliant. So again, you're talking about the maybe it was earlier on, we were talking about the properties, the acquisitions that the council have made. And there was something you brought up about what is Croxley Business Park, which isn't strictly Watford because it's in Croxley Green, but it's one of those little suburbs there.
Yeah.
I drove through it earlier today and just the expanse, and you gave me that interesting thing about who actually owns that land and what's the story on that kind of
acquisition? So about 6 or 7 years ago, the council...
What happened about 6 or 7 years ago? It always comes up. COVID always comes up.
Yeah. So it's just before COVID. The council have now got a kind of a long lease arrangement. So we're effectively the freeholder of that site. We're also for Watford Business Park. And we obviously see those as really important economic parts of our town and as part of our success. So we have an interest in them. I mean, one of the things I suppose links back to my last answer is around those business parks. They're vibrant, they're doing well, but they're not just about places where people turn up at 9 o'clock, clock off at 5 o'clock. If you go to Croxley, they've got a great firework display every year at the start of November. They've got they've got a great gym, they've got a good cafe and all the rest of it. But then also they've got charities that are there, an initiative that the council's supporting, so making sure that we support charities and loads of good organisations based on that park as well.
There was the interesting example you gave with the charity earlier. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about that going into that space.
Yeah, so as you'd expect, there is always some vacant units on a site that is that big. We have charities that now use that space. They don't pay business rates. It helps the council financially as the owner of the site, but we provide, we cover the service costs that are associated with it. It means that these businesses have really good quality space, but also they can make connections with local businesses, with other charities. So I was just visiting one of those this afternoon, Goods for Good, who do great. They actually get products that businesses have got kind of excess stock, and they will take that, and they have a real strong partnership with Moldova. They go to places where there's big conflicts, so in the Middle East, for example, and they get those products there, humanitarian aid, but also clothing. And so it stops it going into landfill, but puts it to a really good use. And so they do phenomenal work and are based in the town.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, yeah. Well, and that was, tell the camera again who it was, just so.
Goods for Good.
Goods for Good. Give them a little shout out.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, fabulous. And then if we look at the, going on the industrial side of things, because that's quite relevant to us, and the space. Is there much? We hear that this country is too full and there's no land. Is there land in this part of neck of the woods? Are we developing, or is it like the repurposing and the reworking of what we've already got? Clarendon Road's the example. Okay, for those people that don't know Watford, which will be most of the audience, there's this road that comes out of the main train station. You look up and you can see this big archway that's been built by TK Maxx, TJ Hughes there, which is quite a stunning, modern looking. It's all you can see through the windows. There's cafe spaces for colleagues and everything. And you look down that road, and that's where we've got all these big businesses. But they're always knocking down and building new ones.
Yeah.
How are you guys effective in that process?
Yeah, I think the first thing is about having a clear vision of what you want to deliver along that. So we have been really clear in our council plan, and we're one of the few councils with an adopted local plan and a clear vision of where we want to take the town, is that road needs to be a premier office space for the region. But there will, of course, be residential as well. So if you look at Clarendon Works, which has got people like the National Lottery operator are based in there, you have 8 floors of grade A, top quality business space. And then behind it, you have a residential built to rent accommodation. I think it's 20 stories.
It is a monster.
And so you have that combination of both living space and workspace. And so to your question earlier, is there space? People always talk about, we need to build more on brownfield. Every single politician for every party will say, let's build on brownfield and save the green belt and precious space. Places like Watford are obviously playing their part in that. So if you look at the rate at which our population has risen in the last 10 years, it's twice the national figure. We've got a housing target of just around 800 properties per year, which we are pretty much delivering on. But I'll be a liar if I said it was easy, because it's fine for politicians to agree in principle, let's build on brownfield. But then, of course, in every single case where there's a brownfield site, there'll be some local residents who will tell you why that particular bit of brownfield is not appropriate because of particular circumstances. And I suppose as politicians, you've got to have that strength of vision and leadership to say, we recognise there's a national housing crisis. We do need to deliver more homes, particularly in sustainable sites. We've been really clear that in Watford, that means sites that are near the train station, Watford Junction, also the town centre. And so if you don't want to build out onto the green belt, and we don't really have green belt in Watford, then you need to build up. And so that's why, the Berkeley Homes scheme, for example, has towers that are 28 stories.
Yes.
And of course, I take a huge, degree of flack for that from some local residents. But I think if you talk to a lot of residents, they will say, my kid can't afford to live in Watford. There's a lack of affordable homes. People, once you start having a more nuanced conversation, recognise part of the solution is to build more. There's a big question about how you do that and doing that well. Yeah. But I think that fundamental premise of we do need to build some more homes is accepted by the vast majority of people.
No, absolutely. And as a resident and as a father with upcoming at some point children who will be looking to move out of my house, I don't ever see that happening, just because of the cost, etc. Yeah. But I suppose if you look at, again, knowing the properties that you're referring to, where you've got 4 big blocks coming in, as you can see, if you travel down the M1 or you travel down any main train line from in whichever direction into central London, you see these pockets, Wembley being a great example with these real change of purpose and everything there. If you look at the sites that you're referring to, they're not brownfields, they were home base, for example. I used to work in that home base when I was a teenager. And so on, and now that has got hundreds of flats on. But I suppose it's from where we work in Black Cat, we work on the commercial side, so we don't do residential. That's one thing that our business doesn't focus on. But you just see this transition of use and repurposing. And at some point, I suppose it feels like, well, you need the work as well.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So where do you as a town, where do you see the balance being struck between those?
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point. And so if we go back to Clarendon Road, we have had to be really proactive about protecting that as a space where there is commercial space. So having that Article 4 directive, being very clear about where that is, also pushing back, because we will get, people who want to develop that as residential coming forward with speculative schemes. As you will know, it's a challenge for councils to sometimes hold the line to protect that, because of course they can appeal to the inspectorate, and you see other councils not very far from us who are losing planning powers because they're seen as blocking too many developments. But you've got to have that balance. You've got to have space for people to work. And I think also recognising that the nature of work's changed. My understanding of the market, for example, is there's definitely been a lot more demand for high quality space, that people will need less of it perhaps, but they want it to be good quality. And so making sure that we're offering that is important too.
That aligns with everything that we do as well. So that makes perfect sense. In terms, something you mentioned earlier about there might be a change of your position, or change of how the districting or whatever the phrase would be for councils. Going back to my thing, I say in every episode, the 6-year-old in the room, I don't understand how those changes are going to be made and how they're going to affect not just residents but businesses. So, what is going to be what are we expecting to happen with this change from council to council, whatever it is? Yeah,
so I think at the moment, I mean, as you probably gathered from my accent, I've not always lived in Watford. And
I don't know where I'm trying to.
So I was born in Preston, grew up in Sheffield.
Okay.
Went to university in Scotland and then moved down to this neck of the woods. And
welcome.
Well, thank you. In most places, you have a council. So if you live in Sheffield, you've got Sheffield Council, who are the council who deal with everything in Sheffield. But obviously in places like Hertfordshire, you've got a county council who deal with the highways and education. And then you've got a district council like Watford who deal with planning, who do with leisure centres, parks, collect your bins. And so you've got this split of county councils and district councils. And the government, I actually agree with them on this, said it doesn't really make sense to have that split. We should just have councils that do everything. Yeah. Because I get emails every single day to complain about potholes in Watford. Technically, they're nothing to do with me because I'm not the leader of the county council, I'm the leader of the district council. So we want to make councils that do everything, so get rid of that split, but they need to cover bigger areas to be financially viable. Right. So initially they said 500,000 people need to live in them, which would mean creating very large councils. Now, from my perspective, that's not always a good thing. If you look at the biggest council in the UK is Birmingham, it's been pretty disastrous.
Yes.
And so for Hertfordshire, we're 1.2 million people. And we've said to the government, well, you could either have 2 big councils, 3 medium-sized councils, or 4 smaller councils. And they said to us, they would tell us the outcome of that by the middle of July, so in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
But as you may have gathered, we're going to have a new Prime Minister. And so we're now very unclear about whether or not we will be told that in the next 2 weeks. But we will be told it imminently. And what will happen is there'll be elections to those new councils in the spring of next year. And in 2028, that new council will take on all of the powers and make all the decisions. And the old councils like Watford Council, Hertfordshire County Council, Stephen has set up, all of those councils will cease to exist.
And it's still going to remain, we're getting a bit political, well, it's not necessarily about building, but it's interesting. Obviously, Watford, we're in the southwest.
Yeah.
So, we border Middlesex and things like that, essentially. So it wouldn't be based on the population; it would still be based on county lines, right? So it'd still be
it'd still be So it would still be across Hertfordshire. There'll be 2, 3, or 4 councils. Lots of other places are going through the same process, so Essex and Surrey and Hampshire and all of these places at different stages. The other thing, and it'll be interesting, obviously, with Andy Burnham and his background, the government have been very clear that part of the reason they're doing this is to then deliver regional mayors, strategic mayors that cover these geographies. And so Hertfordshire, the government have agreed, would have a mayor for the whole of the county council, for the whole of the county, who would then be responsible for economic growth, transport. So again, you're actually getting rid of the 2 tiers, but in a way you're then recreating a different type of 2 tier because you'll have a strategic mayor and you'll have the unitary councils.
So you mentioned Mr. Burnham.
Yes.
So he was is still a mayor, right? Has he given that up now?
There's a by there, yeah.
Manchester is where our business is from. You know, it's not just our roots, but it's our main foundation currently as well. So we've got many of my team live within that borough, so they'll have lived through the changes that he's brought here. Obviously, different party, but are you? Where do you sit optimistically on? Are you optimistic about the change? Or is that for a different podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I hope for the best.
Bear in mind, this comes out in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's hope he's still Prime Minister. So, I mean, I hope for the best. I do think there are fundamental issues in British politics because obviously we've had so many Prime Ministers over the last decade. Not as many as Watford FC managers, but that would be a long podcast if we talked about that. But I do think the nature of politics at the moment, people are very unhappy with the world. We've had a lack of economic growth. There's all social media plays a part. There's lots of reasons for it, but it is very hard to build a consensus and to maintain a degree of popularity in politics in this day and age. So I think Andy Burnham obviously is a lot more relatable perhaps than Keir Starmer, but at the same time he's going to have some really difficult choices to make. I think he's done some good things in Manchester. So the stuff on buses, I completely agree with him. We need a franchised bus model. Bus travel is really important. It's not talked about enough. I think for every train journey in this country, there's 20 bus journeys. Places like Watford, we've got a really interesting dynamic that we've got the really good TfL buses that are reliable, modern, affordable, that run into the town. And then you've got the kind of private businesses that run other buses that are far poorer service. I think whoever's the new mayor of Hertfordshire needs to deliver the franchised buses. But the growth, I mean, he'll often talk about the growth of Manchester and the success of Manchester, which is true. But if you look at that development in central Manchester, it's not about delivering a load of affordable homes, is it? A lot of it is very expensive apartments.
It's a very affluent place.
Yeah.
I spend more time there than I did previously before working this. And it is there's real vibe of success. But like you say, it's not success for all, I'm sure.
No, it's changed a lot. I mean, when I go there, I see the difference as I say, I grew up in the north. When I'd go to Manchester in the 80s, it's a vastly different place now, and that's good. And I think actually, having that vibrancy and that economic growth is really important, and it's been a problem for this country for a very long time.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting and exciting to see what happens, and obviously the soundbite that's come out recently is the number 10 of the North. Now, we're not part of London, but like you were going back to with transport links, and the reason that a lot of these investments have been made in towns like ours, and let's think of some other ones that are a similar distance, somewhere like Croydon or something south of London. Those kind of hubs where you can have that commutable location, so people can work anywhere or live anywhere and still work here. Now, if we're looking for that devolution, I think the term is.
Yep.
How do you think that might fare for, let's say in 10 years' time, for towns like Watford? Is that an advantage, or do we kind of, if that plan happens, do we kind of just taper down a little bit with the London thing?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say on that is, I mean, obviously I support devolution to places like Watford and Hertfordshire. When the government talk about devolution, sometimes for me devolution is about passing power down to the lowest possible level to let local communities have power and budgets to change their lives. If you create a regional mayor, there's a question about, well, is that really devolution? Because you're actually just putting a lot of power in one person that sits over 1.2 million people. I mean, I say this as a mayor myself, and so I can see the pluses and minuses to the system.
But thrice elected mayor, it's fine. You can do that
now. The other thing that I'd say is that Andy Burnham, there's a lot of grievance in this country, and people are angry and they blame other people for the kind of fate of the country. The thing that Andy Burnham's done quite effectively, and again I say this as a northerner, is the grievance he has is that everyone forgets about the north and all the focus is on London. And to lots of people, I don't know if our parents are going to be listening to this, they would agree with that. Lots of people in the north would definitely, that resonates. And so it's a kind of it's a populist message. Yeah. When he's the Prime Minister of the whole country, obviously he's going to have to change that record a little bit. And I think one of the things that's really important is recognising that Hertfordshire is a successful place, but there are real pockets of deprivation. There are real issues with people not achieving their potential. And also some of the problems we have in places like Watford are worse than they are in the north. So the affordability of housing is a far bigger problem here than it is in Sheffield, where I grew up. And so to pretend that somehow all the problems are in the north and the south is all, sweetness and light for everybody is obviously not accurate.
Yeah, clearly not. Yeah, absolutely. And then I suppose, we're on politics. Andy Burnham, the next Prime Minister, but it's obviously I don't want to use the word threat because it's going to say that I'm going to put myself on one side of the fence or not. But let's there is the reform government that
potential
might happen. Now, you and the Liberal Democrats here and Watford voters have made their voices clear. They didn't respond to that. And that might well be down to the success that you guys have had, the fact that there is, plenty of investment, like we talked about all these places in here. Where is your excitement / fear of that potential situation in 3 years' time?
Yeah, I think the reform thing's really interesting. Again, I think you've got to look at what's driving people to that. People feel fed up. They feel they can't trust politicians. They feel the country's not doing well. So I kind of get all of that, and I kind of sympathise with much of it. I think the job for those of us who have a different outlook on the world to reform is to kind of say, well, yeah, we totally get that. This is our solutions. But also, I've always been really kind of militant about the fact that you elect me on a manifesto, and my 2018, my 2022 manifesto and this one, I can be really clear with residents and say, look, these are the promises I made. I have delivered every single one of them. And so when I stand before you and say, I'm going to deliver a bike share scheme, or I'm going to do investment in this park, or whatever it is, that we have then stuck to it. And I think the real problem, one of the problems in politics is that people haven't done that. I do think that the reality of when reform have taken over councils might start to have an impact on some of the national polling, because you see that, I'm a county councillor as well as being the leader of a district council. And so at Hertfordshire County Council, they elected 14 reform councillors. One of them's already left. The group's already spending a lot of time arguing amongst itself. And so it's easy to be grumpy and to say, well, things aren't going well, which is kind of the one thing that unites reform members. Once you then have the difficulty and the reality of trying to, run councils, you kind of, crash into kind of the cold light of day. And so, it will be interesting to see if that starts to have an impact on people's kind of view of reform.
Yeah. So one thing we've not touched on really is the outlook and the looking outwards to other inspirational places. So what do you consider to be the comparators and of other towns or cities up and down the UK?
So we often compare ourselves to other places that are kind of geographically similar. So around the M25, and if you look at kind of Reading or Croydon and all of these sort of similar-ish places, and I think it is really helpful in roles like mine to go and see those and to think about, well, what are they doing well? What could we learn from? I would say one of the massive strengths of Watford is the partnership and the collaboration. I know it's kind of a bit of a cliche and people often talk about it, but I do think in Watford there's that genuine relationship between business leaders and things where we know that there's areas of strength. How do we then build upon them? So the success of the creative industries in the area, one of the big things we're working on at the moment is having a Hertfordshire TV and Film Festival. I mentioned before, I went to Edinburgh University. Obviously, the Fringe is really important there, but they have a lot of other festivals there. Given the hub around creative sector, what's the next thing that can really lift it? So we're looking to have that festival to cement our role in that area. So I suppose it's never resting on our laurels as well, and sort of thinking, well, what's the next opportunity? And that can-do attitude, which I would say is a massive strength of Watford.
Brilliant. So I suppose bringing it back to opportunities.
Yeah.
And so again, in towns like Watford, where they've got their independence, good transport links, what would you think are the opportunities? How would you sell, the elevator pitch to a business, whether it's looking to open its first bricks and mortar, coffee shop, all the way through to, Universal are aware that Warner Brothers are here, so why don't you come on board as well? What's the pitch?
Yeah, the pitch starts with location, which we mentioned earlier. So I think that's the number one selling point for Watford. But then if you look at all the kind of metrics about what makes a place successful, Watford scores really highly. So very well educated, population. If you look at Lambert Smith Hampton do a vitality index, don't they, where they look at places outside of London.
Yeah.
I think it's 100 different urban areas, and they rank them and they measure them on all these different things. And in the last 4 years that they produced it, every single year, Watford's been in the top 3. So last year it was number 2. And so I think that shows it's not just kind of me saying it or politicians, but there is some evidence weight to it. And that's about quality of life, education levels, life expectancy, environmental factors. There's all of these different things. I think the other thing about Watford is the culture of the place actually has a lot going for it. So because of the size of the place, it's incredibly well connected. Like everybody, there's not kind of 6 degrees of separation.
Oh, no.
There is one. So like when we spoke before this, immediately we both knew somebody, and then you have that a lot. And I think actually in business, that has a lot to be said for it, that you've got those networks that form very quickly, and you're able to then connect people, think, okay, you're looking for someone who can do this. That actually, I think, works quite well.
I think a perfect segue now is what's happening at the Town Hall.
Yes, so that's going to be a really good development. When I was first elected in 2018, I was told that so we've got a kind of a classic 1930s town hall, red brick, high ceilings. My office was a lovely kind of oak panelled, huge office with a massive desk. And I think I was told the capacity was about 750 people could work in that building. Okay. And I said, how many people
Each with a massive...
Each with a big desk in their own huge office. And I said, and how many people do we employ? And they said, about 230. So, even if everyone was in, there was kind of 3 times as much space. And so we are kind of reconfiguring and reimagining the town hall. During COVID, 100,000 people had a vaccination in that building. And for the vast majority of them, I was volunteering some of the days there. They would say to me, I've never been inside this building because...
I've never been inside the building.
Yeah, why would you? Unless you were kind of homeless or had some, emergency. Very, very few people did. So the plan now, we're having an innovation and incubation hub, which has been funded all the way back when the government announced levelling up funding.
Oh, yeah.
We got funding.
How far I've levelled up. But yeah, there we go.
So we got money from that, which funded the redevelopment of the Watford Coliseum as well. So we'll have a new innovation hub opening next year. We'll have a new museum, which is we had a meeting last night where we confirmed the people who are going to do all of that. They did the Titanic experience in Belfast. They've done lots of V&A, lots of really great projects. So they'll be delivering our new museum. And there'll be community space. There will still be officers there to talk to people who come in with various problems. And there'll be a cafe. So I think creating that kind of civic hub is really important. But that development will have all of those features. It's at a site that's next to a leisure centre, a college, a library. And of course, there'll be residential as part of that as well. And I think creating those communities that have all of those features to it is really what we should be about, and also making sure it's high quality development.
That's amazing, Peter. Thank you so much for coming in today. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot about my hometown, and hopefully we've told some people some interesting things that might be relevant to their lives and their local communities as well. So just say thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening or watching out there. I've been Andy Clow. Thank you very much. We look forward to welcoming you back next time.